Okay, so we agreed that the curves that we are drawing actually represent particular functions of x, right? Uh, and the notation in mathematics is f of x. So the curve represents the function of a particular um, function of x, right? So what happens is that there are values of x for which the function is positive, right? For which this is a positive result, right? Okay. And then there are values of x for which the function will be negative, or for which the function will give you a negative answer, right? So for example, imagine I had something like this, 3x minus 4. If I put x is equal to 1, this becomes 3 times 1 minus 4. That's 3 minus 4, which gives you a minus 1. So the result is negative, right? But if I put x is equal to 2, that gives me 3 times 2 minus 4, which is 6 minus 4, which gives you 2. That's positive. So there are some values of x which if I feed in this function here, I get a positive result. And there are some values of x which if I feed into that function there, I get a negative result. But here, we're looking at it from a graphical view, right? So if I draw the graph of a function, it will be y is equal to whatever that function is. Now, what's important is that when the curve is drawn, right, there are values of x for which the curve is above the x-axis, right? This is our x-axis here, right? So there are values of x for which from there all the way up to here, this thing or the curve is above the x-axis, right? But if we move this way, going that direction, right? This thing, the curve is now below. If you're looking at the curve, here's the curve. The curve is now below. If we move beyond that point, the curve is now below. So between point A, I'm just going to call it point A, and point B, the curve is above the x-axis, but before point A and after point B, the curve is below the x-axis. Now what we need to understand is that when the curve is above, when the curve is above, the function is positive. So the function is positive, right? When the curve is below, the function is negative, right? So between A and B, the function is positive. Beyond B and before A, the function is negative, right? We can make the same observations if the curve is like this, right? If you look at it now, from that point to that point, the graph is below now. So it's below. So now between these 2 points, I'll call x and y, the function is negative, right? But before those points, right, going that direction, it's above, so it's positive. And after y, it's above, so it's positive. So again, whenever the curve is below the x-axis, the function which it represents has a negative value. Whenever the curve is above the x-axis, the function which it represents has a positive value. So let's have a practical situation, okay? You don't have to think too much. Let's just have a simple practical situation. For the function 3x minus x squared, find the range of values of x for which the function is positive and for which the function is negative. So we agreed that for positive, we're going to check where the curve is above. And then for negative, we're going to check where the curve is below the x-axis. So we're going to check where it's above the x-axis and where it's below the x-axis. That's all you're doing. So if this is the curve that's drawn, y is equal to 3x minus x squared. The curve is above the x-axis from 0 all the way up to 3, right? That's when it's above. So that's when this function is positive. This function is positive for values of x that start from 0 up to 3, okay? So this function is positive for values of x that start from 0 going to 3. Okay? Another way to write this is to write this as an inequality. We'll say 0 less than or equal to x less than or equal to 3, right? So where x takes values between 0 and 3, this function is positive. So that's the range of values. Okay? For negative now, we know that this function is going to be negative for all values of x that are less than 0. All values that are less than 0, minus 1, minus 2, minus 3, this function is sinking down. This function is going to be negative for all values of x that are more than 3. As you can see, it's going down. Okay, so it's negative when x values are less than 0. It's negative when x values are more than 3, right? So if we write that, it means we'll have this thing is going to be negative when x values are less than 0, right? And when x values are greater than 3. So you write x is less than 0 union x is greater than 3, or simply and, whichever one you want there, okay? So for values of x that are less than 0 and for values of x that are greater than 3, this function is negative. So it's all about checking whether it's above the x-axis or below the x-axis.